Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Think and Speak English. I'm Julia.
And I'm Adam. We're really glad you're joining us today.
This is episode 12, and we are now firmly in C1 territory. If you've been following our series from the beginning, you've built up so much already. You've practiced daily conversations, learned how to express opinions, handle disagreements politely, and even explored persuasive speaking. That's an incredible foundation.
And now at C1, we're going deeper. Today's topic is one that comes up constantly in professional life, in academic settings, and honestly, even in everyday conversations. We're talking about explaining complex ideas clearly.
This is one of those skills that separates someone who understands something from someone who can actually help others understand it too. And that difference matters so much in the real world.
Think about it. You might be brilliant at your job, but if you can't explain your ideas to colleagues, to clients, to your manager in a way that makes sense to them, your brilliance stays invisible.
And when you're doing this in English as a second language, the challenge gets even bigger. You're managing vocabulary, sentence structure, and clarity all at the same time.
So today, we want to make that a little easier. We're going to share personal experiences, walk through realistic examples, practice useful phrases, and talk about the mindset that makes complex explanations feel natural and calm.
As always, there's no rush. Listen at your own pace. If something clicks for you, pause and replay it. Let the language settle in.
All right, Julia, let's dive in.
So Adam, before we get into examples, let's think about what this skill actually looks like at C1.
That's a great starting point. At B2, you learn to explain your ideas clearly, meaning you could organize a thought and express it in a logical way. But at C1, the expectation shifts. Now, you're not just explaining simple ideas. You're taking something that is genuinely complicated, maybe abstract, maybe technical, maybe layered, and making it accessible to someone who doesn't share your expertise.
And that requires a different set of tools. You need to be able to simplify without losing accuracy. You need to read your audience and adjust in real time. And you need to stay patient when the other person doesn't understand right away.
Exactly. And there's something else that's really important at this level. You need to be comfortable with the idea that your first explanation might not land perfectly. And that's okay. Being able to rephrase, to try a different angle, to offer an analogy, that flexibility is what C1 communication is all about.
I love that point. But it's not about getting it right in one perfect sentence. It's about being willing to try again and having the language tools to do it.
And honestly, this is a skill that even native speakers struggle with. How many times have you sat in a meeting where someone clearly knew their subject, but couldn't explain it in a way that anyone else could follow?
Oh, too many times! So, if you're learning to do this well in English, you're actually ahead of a lot of native speakers. That's something to feel good about.
Maybe I should share something personal here, because I think it illustrates the challenge perfectly.
Please do!
A while ago, I was in a meeting and someone asked me to explain our team's strategy for the next year. And I gave this very polished, very structured answer. I said something like, our strategic focus is on market consolidation, operational efficiency, and targeted expansion into adjacent verticals.
It sounds like a business book.
Yes, I was basically speaking like a book, not like a person. Later I tried again and said, at a basic level, our strategy is just the answer to a simple question. What are we going to focus on this year? And what are we going to say no to? That landed much better.
What a difference! The first version was technically correct, but it created distance. The second version invited people in. It made them think, oh, I understand what he's talking about.
And that's the key lesson. When you explain complex ideas, your goal is not to impress people with sophisticated vocabulary. Your goal is to create understanding. And sometimes the simplest language does that best.
I think a lot of advanced learners fall into that trap, actually. They've worked so hard to learn formal academic vocabulary that they use it everywhere, even when simpler words would communicate better.
That's such a good observation, Julia. There's a time and place for formal language. Absolutely. But in most spoken situations, especially when you're trying to help someone understand something new, plain language wins.
So, the first principle we want to share today is this. Clarity is not about dumbing things down. It's about opening things up. So, the other person can step inside the idea with you.
I really like that way of putting it. Opening things up. That's exactly what it feels like when someone explains something well.
So, one of the central things we'll keep returning to in this episode is this idea of breaking things down. If we break it down, a complex idea usually has a few core parts. When you see those parts clearly, you can explain them more calmly.
And when you explain calmly, the other person feels safer to say, "Wait, I'm not sure I got that." Or, "Can you explain that another way?" That's also part of advanced communication, being able to handle confusion without panic.
That's such an important point. When you stay calm and patient, you create a space where the other person feels comfortable asking questions. And that actually helps you communicate better, because their questions show you what needs more clarification.
So breaking things down is not just a technique for the speaker. It also changes the dynamic of the conversation. It makes it more collaborative.
Exactly. And here's a simple framework you can use. When you face a complex idea, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what is the core idea in one sentence? Second, what are the 2 or 3 main parts or steps? And third, what is a simple example or comparison that makes it real?
If you can answer those 3 questions for yourself, you're ready to explain the idea to someone else.
And you don't have to answer them perfectly. Even a rough version is better than jumping into the explanation without any structure at all.
That's true. A rough map is always better than no map.
Maybe we can start with one idea and walk through it step by step. Something that is a bit abstract, but still connected to daily life.
How about we try explaining the concept of inflation? It's something that affects everyone, but a lot of people find it hard to explain clearly.
Oh, that's a great choice. So let's imagine someone asks you, what is inflation exactly? How would you start?
I'd start with the simplest possible version. At a basic level, inflation means that prices go up over time. The same money you have today will buy you less in the future.
That's clear and relatable. Anyone who has been to a supermarket understands that feeling.
Right, and then if they want more detail, I'd break it down further. If we break it down, there are usually 2 main reasons prices go up. First, when people have more money to spend. Businesses raise prices because demand is higher. Second, when it costs more to produce things, like when fuel or raw materials get more expensive, those costs get passed on to consumers.
Notice what Adam just did. He signaled the structure first. There are usually 2 main reasons, and then he walked through each one. That gives the listener a mental framework to hold on to.
And if the person still looks confused, you can add an analogy. Think of it like this. Imagine there are only 10 loaves of bread in a bakery, and suddenly 20 people want to buy bread. The baker can charge more because there's more demand than supply. That's one way inflation works.
Analogies are so powerful. They take something abstract and connect it to something the listener can picture in their mind.
And here's the thing about analogies. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be close enough to give the listener a starting point.
That's really reassuring for learners. You don't need the perfect metaphor. You just need something that helps the other person take the first step into understanding.
Let's go back to the business strategy example, because I think it shows very clearly how breaking things down works in a professional setting.
Sure. So imagine your manager asks you in a meeting, "Can you explain our strategy for the year?"
Instead of using jargon, you start with the frame. You say, if we break it down, there are really 3 main things we're focusing on this year.
Then you name them.
At a basic level, first we want to stabilize the current product. Second, we want to expand in 1 or 2 new markets. Third, we want to improve our internal processes so we can move faster in the future.
After that, you can choose whether to go deeper into each part or stop, depending on the listener's needs.
And you could check understanding gently by asking, is that clear so far? Or should I go into more detail on any of those?
That question respects the other person's time and intelligence. It doesn't assume they need a full lecture, but it offers more if necessary.
And notice the language pattern here. If we break it down, then numbering the parts, first, second, third, and then checking in. It's a simple structure, but it works beautifully in so many situations.
Whether you're in a board meeting, a team huddle, or even explaining something to a friend over coffee, that pattern keeps things organized and easy to follow.
And one more thing. When you number your points, you're not just helping the listener. You're helping yourself. It keeps you on track and prevents you from wandering into tangents.
That's such a practical benefit. Numbering your points is like giving yourself a roadmap while you speak.
I'd like to spend a moment on cause and effect because that's another part of explaining complex ideas.
Yes, especially when you're talking about things like growth, change, or efficiency. People need to know not just what, but why.
A simple pattern is, if we do X, then Y is likely to happen because Z.
Can you give us a concrete example of that?
Sure. If we reduce the onboarding time for new employees, then our team productivity will improve faster because people will be contributing sooner.
That's so clear. The listener immediately sees the action, the result, and the reason behind it.
And you can also reverse it. The reason we're investing in better training materials is that our current onboarding takes too long and it's slowing down team performance.
So you can go from cause to effect or from effect back to cause, depending on what feels more natural in the moment.
Exactly. And here's another useful pattern. What this means in practice is, this phrase is wonderful because it takes something theoretical and makes it concrete.
For example,
our goal is to improve customer retention. What this means in practice is that we'll be reaching out to customers who haven't purchased in the last 60 days, offering them personalized recommendations.
that's excellent. The first sentence gives the big picture, and the second sentence shows what it actually looks like in real life.
And that's often what people need most. They don't just need to understand the concept. They need to see how it affects them or how it shows up in the day-to-day.
I'd add one more pattern here. The way this works is, it's casual enough for spoken English, but it signals that you're about to walk someone through a process or mechanism.
The way this works is each department submits their budget request by the 15th, and then the finance team reviews everything and sends back approvals by the end of the month.
Simple, clear, and easy to follow. These patterns are like building blocks. Once you have a few of them in your toolkit, you can explain almost anything.
Let's practice with a realistic scenario now. Imagine you work in technology and a colleague from the marketing team asks you, what exactly does an API do?
Oh, that's a classic situation. Technical people explaining things to non-technical people. It happens every day in workplaces around the world.
So you might start like this. At a basic level, an API is like a translator between two systems. It lets one piece of software talk to another piece of software, even if they were built differently.
That's a great start. The analogy of a translator makes it immediately relatable.
Then you might add, for example, when you use an app on your phone to check the weather, that app sends a request to a weather service through an API. The API takes that request, gets the information, and sends it back to your app. You see the forecast, but behind the scenes, the API did all the communication.
And if your colleague says, wait, so is it like a middleman? You can say, exactly, that's a great way to think about it. It's the middleman that makes sure both sides understand each other.
Notice what happened there. The colleague offered their own analogy, and instead of correcting it or dismissing it, I validated it. That's part of explaining things well, building on what the other person brings to the conversation.
And if they have a follow-up question like, why do we need APIs? Why can't the systems just talk directly? You can say, the reason we need them is that different systems are often built with different languages and structures. An API creates a common format so they can exchange information without needing to understand each other's entire system.
And then you might check in. Does that make sense? Or would it help if I walked through another example?
That check-in is so important. It keeps the conversation collaborative instead of turning it into a lecture.
And it shows humility. You're not assuming your explanation was perfect. You're inviting the other person to guide you toward what they still need.
Let's try another scenario. This time, imagine you're a team leader, and you need to explain to your team why the company is restructuring.
This is a sensitive one, because restructuring can make people anxious.
Exactly. So not only do you need to be clear, you also need to be thoughtful about how people might feel.
You might begin like this. I know there's been some uncertainty lately, and I want to be as transparent as I can about what's happening. If we break it down, there are really two main changes that affect our team.
Good. You're acknowledging the emotional context before jumping into the facts. That makes people feel seen.
First, our department is being combined with the customer success team. What this means in practice is that we'll be working more closely with people who handle client relationships directly. Second, our reporting structure is changing, which means we'll have a new manager starting next month.
Clear, structured, and honest. And then you might add, the reason behind these changes is that the company wants to bring product development and customer feedback closer together, so we can respond to client needs faster.
And then you invite questions. I know this is a lot to take in. I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm happy to share what I know and to pass your questions along to leadership.
That last part is so important. Admitting you don't have all the answers actually builds more trust than pretending you do.
And it models something we've been talking about throughout this episode. Being comfortable with uncertainty while still communicating clearly about what you do know.
In a situation like this, your team doesn't need you to have every detail. They need you to be calm, honest, and willing to keep the conversation going.
And that's a very C1 skill. Managing not just information, but also relationships and emotions through language.
Let's spend some time on something that many learners find stressful. What to do when the other person doesn't understand your explanation.
This is really important because it happens to everyone, and how you respond in that moment says a lot about your communication skills.
The worst thing you can do is repeat the exact same explanation, louder or slower. That doesn't help, and it can make the other person feel embarrassed.
Instead, try a completely different angle. If your first explanation was abstract, try a concrete example. If it was technical, try an analogy. If it was long, try a shorter version.
Here are some phrases that signal you're about to rephrase. Let me explain that another way. Maybe a better way to put it is, think of it like this. Here's a simpler version. Each of these tells the listener, I'm going to try again, and it's completely fine that you need a different approach.
And you know what? Some of the best explanations I've ever given came from the second or third attempt, not the first.
That's so true. The first attempt often helps you realize what wasn't working, and the rephrase becomes tighter and clearer because of it.
Another useful strategy is to ask the listener what part is confusing. You can say, which part felt unclear? Was it the concept itself or the example I used?
That's a smart question because it saves time. Instead of re-explaining everything, you can focus on the specific part that needs work.
And sometimes the other person's confusion teaches you something about your own understanding. If you can't explain it simply, maybe you need to think about it more deeply yourself.
There's a famous quote about that, isn't there? Something like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Exactly. Explaining things to others is actually one of the best ways to deepen your own understanding.
Let's take a moment to go through the key phrases we've been using and add a few more to your toolkit.
The first one, and probably the most versatile, is at a basic level. This phrase tells the listener, I'm going to start simple. It sets expectations and reduces pressure. At a basic level, machine learning is about teaching computers to find patterns in data.
The second is if we break it down. This signals that something complex is about to become more manageable. If we break it down, there are 3 stages to the approval process.
Third, what this really means is, this phrase is perfect for translating jargon or abstract language into everyday terms. Our revenue grew by 12%. What this really means is we earned significantly more this quarter than we expected.
Fourth, the way this works is, this one is great for processes or systems. The way this works is, you submit your request online, and someone from our team reviews it within 48 hours.
Fifth, let me explain that another way. We talked about this one already, but it's worth emphasizing. It's your go-to phrase when the first explanation didn't land.
Sixth, is that clear so far, or should I go into more detail? This check-in question is gentle and respectful. It keeps the conversation moving in the right direction.
Seventh, the reason behind this is, this connects actions to motivations, and it's especially useful when people want to know why, not just what. The reason behind this change is that customer feedback showed a strong preference for a simpler interface.
And eighth, what this means in practice is, this one bridges the gap between theory and reality. People love hearing it because it answers their biggest unspoken question. How does this actually affect me?
If you practice even 3 or 4 of these phrases until they feel natural, you'll notice a real difference in how confidently you explain things in English.
And remember, you don't have to use all of them in one conversation. Pick the ones that fit the situation and the audience.
Julia, should we talk about some mistakes people commonly make? I think that can be just as helpful as knowing what to do.
Absolutely. The first one, and this is very common among advanced learners, is using overly formal or technical language when the audience doesn't need it.
We saw that in my personal story at the beginning, the adjacent verticals moment. The language was correct, but it created a wall between me and my listeners.
The second mistake is giving too much information at once. When you're knowledgeable about a topic, it's tempting to share everything you know, but that overwhelms people.
A good rule of thumb is, start with the minimum they need to understand, and then let their questions guide you deeper.
Third, not using examples. Abstract explanations without examples are like giving someone a map with no landmarks. They might understand the shape of the idea, but they can't place themselves in it.
Fourth, forgetting to check understanding. If you talk for 5 minutes without pausing, you have no idea whether the other person is following you or completely lost.
And fifth, getting frustrated when someone doesn't understand. This is a natural human reaction. But at C1, you're expected to manage that frustration and respond with patience.
If someone says, I still don't get it, the best response is curiosity, not irritation. Okay, let me try a different angle. Or, what part is tripping you up shows that you care about their understanding, not just your own performance.
And honestly, the ability to respond with patience and flexibility when someone doesn't understand. That's one of the most respected communication skills in any language.
I completely agree. It shows maturity, empathy, and genuine commitment to the conversation.
Before we move to our summary, I want to touch on something that doesn't get discussed enough. the emotional experience of trying to explain complex ideas in a second language.
This is so important. Many advanced learners feel a kind of inner frustration because they know that in their first language, they could explain the idea perfectly. But in English, they feel limited, and that gap between what they know and what they can express can be really discouraging.
If that sounds familiar, please know that it's completely normal, and it does get better with practice.
One thing that helps is lowering the pressure on yourself. You don't have to deliver a perfect explanation every time. You just have to get close enough for the other person to engage with you.
And sometimes close enough is more than enough. People are usually more understanding than we think, especially when they can see that you're making an effort to be clear.
Another thing that helps is practicing out loud. Before a meeting or a presentation, try explaining your key ideas to yourself or to a friend in simple spoken English. Hearing yourself say the words makes a huge difference.
It really does. There's something about saying it out loud that reveals where the explanation is smooth and where it gets stuck.
And when you do stumble in a real conversation, remember the phrases we've practiced. Let me explain that another way. At a basic level, what I'm trying to say is, these give you a graceful way to restart without losing confidence. What matters here is that you start to feel how a complex idea can be opened gently, step by step, in spoken English.
You've heard phrases like, the way this works is, if we break it down at a basic level, what this really means is, let me explain that another way. And you've heard them in real dialogues, not as rules.
You've also heard us make small adjustments, respond to confusion, and use examples and analogies to carry abstract ideas into daily life.
If, in the next days, you find yourself needing to explain something complex, in a meeting, in a study group, or to a friend, you might try starting a little slower.
You might say, at a basic level, this is about, and name the core idea before going into details.
You might say, if we break it down, there are 3 parts, and then walk through them.
You might check in and ask, does that make sense so far? And if it doesn't, you try a different angle? No frustration, no panic. Just another attempt, with a calmer voice and a fresh example.
That willingness to try again, to rephrase, to meet the other person where they are, that's what makes someone truly skilled at explaining complex ideas.
And it's a skill that serves you everywhere, at work, in interviews, in academic discussions, and in everyday life.
Remember, you don't need perfect English to explain things clearly. You need clear thinking, a few reliable phrases, and the confidence to say, let me try that again.
And you already have all of that. Now you just have a few more tools to make it easier.
We're really glad you spent this time with us today. We hope these examples and phrases give you something practical to work with.
Thank you for listening, for thinking along with us, and for letting these patterns settle into your mind at their own pace.
In your next conversation, whether it's at work or at home, you might try explaining one thing a little differently. Start with the core idea. Break it into parts. Use an example, and check in with the other person.
Small steps, Julia. That's all it takes.
Small steps that lead to big confidence.
If you've been enjoying Think and Speak English, please share this episode with someone who might find it useful. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a wonderful time to do that, so you don't miss what's coming next.
In episode 13, we'll be exploring negotiation skills, how to express what you need, listen to what others need, and find solutions that work for everyone. It's going to be a really practical and rewarding episode.
Take care of yourself, everyone.
And we'll talk to you again next time.
Bye for now.
Bye!